What's up, everybody? Nate Sarantino here, back with another episode of the Guided Spirits podcast. And today's episode is on why everything is so imperfect, but perfect at the same time. Let me explain. The idea of perfection is unobtainable. Or the perfection is unobtainable, but the idea of going towards perfection is as best as you're gonna get. You want to focus on being as close to perfect as possible, but you never want to be held back by not being perfect. Like, in every single podcast I release, I see areas I could have done better. And I could say, oh, I'll just re-record it. But at the end of the day, I'm better off allowing my stream of consciousness to go and grow than re-recording, and then I lose the things that I got out of my stream of consciousness. It's impossible to say things the exact same way every time, and no matter how good or how much you think you know a subject, you're not going to say it the same time twice, and that's just how it goes. Every single moment throughout history and in the past, present, future is only going to happen once. With that being said, there's deja vu where it seems like you've been in the same situation before, and that's a different topic. So leave that to the side. The idea is nothing is ever going to be perfect. So you want to get as close to perfection as possible, and the only way for a universe such as ours or a multiverse to be as perfect as it is to constantly be evolving and growing. And I was just in my kitchen thinking to myself, why is the universe always expanding if everything's actually perfect? But the only reason that it's perfect is because it's always growing and always evolving. The growth is where the perfection comes from. All the balance that goes on to make such a beautiful universe work as it does is only from that constant evolution. If you're not growing, well, you're decaying. You either are building or breaking down. There's nothing stagnant in this universe, and the perfection comes from the transfer of energy and the balance. It's so magnificent to watch when two things are transferring energy back and forth, and you can see the change from the start to the finish. And it's like when I look at me and how my podcast was back in February. For background, I spent 5.5 hours driving to southern New Hampshire from upstate New York today, and I spent about 4.5 hours of this 5 hours, I would say, 4 hours listening to my own podcast. I listened to from episode 60 to the newest episodes that came out. And then I went all the way back to the beginning and listened up to episode 10. And the change from the way I was speaking back when I was just starting the podcast and when I did those first two podcasts with Nicole to the way I was speaking when I did the interview with George Michaud and we talked about our near-death experiences and addiction and this being given opioids in the hospital, stuff like that. It's changed so much. And the idea is I never would have started the podcast if I thought I was going to be perfect. And I knew, I still sound, decent. I know what I'm talking about. But the idea is you're always going to be getting better. And this goes for anything you're doing. And I keep thinking back to the Wolf of Wall Street and Jordan Belfort saying, stay sharp, enthusiastic, and be an expert in your field. Well, it's impossible for an expert to become better if they don't think they can grow. And that's why the number one cause of death is thinking that you're your best. And when I was at one of the lowest times in my life, I felt like I knew everything. And it was deadly. It was the most deadly thing I've ever thought in my life. When I was damn, I know so much. And then the second you start to think you know a lot, it will bring you so far down because everyone knows like nothing, like literally, like there's such an infinite and vast amount of knowledge to be obtained in this universe. So no matter how many fields or how many subjects you actually know, you're still gonna know nothing, because every field and every subject has so many niche components to it. It's like, yeah, you can understand the basic mechanics of an engine, but can you build an engine from scratch? And like, this is like, and then forget about, move to like the transmission of a car, and then can you build that transmission, and can you actually build the gear set, like the input shaft and the output shaft, and then like each individual torque, and they have to be positioned ever so slightly, like decimals of a millimeter off, and you're gonna break and blow up your car. Like, it's so particular, and that is where you get so close to perfection. But there's always gonna be just a little bit of an area of like, you have like that, like plus or minus, like this, like it's like your percent error. Like, you're never gonna be like absolutely perfect. And you go back to like chemistry, and like you think like you run an experiment and you get like a 95% yield, and theoretically you're supposed to get like a 99.9, like 100% realistically in any theoretical experiment. But even then, it's so like, it's crazy. It's so hard to actually obtain perfection, and it's genuinely impossible because nothing's perfect. And the perfection in the universe is those imperfections. And Kevin Gates has a song, and and song's literally called "Perfect Imperfection." And then Nipsey Hussle also has a line in one of his songs where he says, like, learn to love what's imperfect, that's what God do. And like this bar, I listened to the song on my way home, and it's what made me think of it. And I was like, damn, like, it's so true. Like, if you actually are at like Christ consciousness and you're understanding what it means to be as close to perfect as possible, you learn to love the imperfections, and you'll learn that every person has their flaws, and no one's actually going to be perfect. Everyone's going to have something about them that makes them like their own individual. No one is perfect. No one has every single like area of their life perfect. And the more you come to realize this, the more you start to see like, wow, we're all just trying to make it through. We're all trying to figure it out along the way. No one actually knows everything about their own business. No one knows how to predict everything that's going to happen in the future. You can get close. You can have some crazy psychic abilities, but at the end of the day, some things are just unpredictable. Like, for real, like you and even like the best like people like using calculus to predict a curve, like you can only predict COVID cases to a certain extent. Like, there's so many unknown variables in almost every subject you go to, because you can break it down so small into strings in quantum physics, and then you can see like the planets. Like, we can predict like where things are going to be, but there's always going to be like random things that we weren't planning on. Like, a meteor might come in and like knock Earth off its orbit one day. Like, I mean, it's just so random. Like, anything could happen, and you don't know what's going to happen, especially if you can't see that far into the future. And there's so many unpredictable things. Like, nothing's ever going to go exactly perfect. And it's like, you just have to be able to work with imperfection. And the idea of like always trying to find a song or like make your song perfect, and you wait too long to release it, and then you lose your opportunity, and someone else releases an album, and they get like the #1 album of the year, and you waited too long, and everyone's listening to their album instead of yours. I've heard of this happening a lot with people in like rap and in all music genres. If you time your album release wrong, it's going to screw up so much for so many people. I think this happened with Travis Scott and Astroworld. I remember seeing this somewhere, but there's so many key components when it comes to releasing music, when it comes to releasing YouTube videos, podcasts. Like, what day, what night, what time? Why do I release my podcast at 5:55 a.m. and they still release it at 6 a.m.? But I purposely pick 5:55. I love that because that is the number that equates to change, the angel number of change. Like, everything happens, and the whole point of this podcast is self-improvement. I'm trying to help you all change for the better. I'm trying to help you become closer to that perfection, and the closest you're gonna get is gonna be be Christ consciousness, when you start walking and becoming your own creator, when you start walking like you are the creator of whatever you want. The universe is mental, so if you want to create something, you have to be vibrating as a creator. You have to be vibrating one with everything, one with the universe. It's the key to becoming the best version of yourself. It's the key to overcoming imperfections, and last but not least, it's the key to growth. And the only reason that we are all somewhat perfect is because we continue to grow in consciousness. Just as the universe is ever expanding, so are we. We are always growing. We are always becoming better. And even through terms of reincarnation, the whole point of living multiple lives is to keep growing, because the soul can only learn so much in one life. The body, if not taken properly care of, will only live for a finite amount of time. Your genetics, your DNA, your chromosomes can only replicate so many times until those telomeres are so short that you age so fast. And you'll notice people towards the end of their life, they age like it's nothing. It will be they'll have 10 years, and then all of a sudden within those 10 years they'll age 50 years. And it's crazy, because that's how it goes. You get close, and then all of a sudden it's just a steep drop off. So if you can keep those telomeres lengthened, 528 hertz frequency repairs your DNA. I'm telling you, it's the key. When you figure out how to become a better version of yourself, you will figure out that the only way to come even close to perfect is to keep growing, keep learning, keep trying to become better. And that's where I'm going to leave it off of. Thank you for listening. I'm Nate Sarantino, and this was the Guided Spirits Podcast.